An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She came to expose him. He planned to destroy her, but nothing prepared them for the dark desire that would unite them. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised. Buy this tale. If you like stories of love and romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day, continuing. The mirrored elevator of the Valenti building reflected Hannah Adams in multiple versions of herself. Each one seemed to carry the weight of a different lie. She adjusted the faux leather folder against her chest and took a deep breath, feeling the expensive perfume she had borrowed from her neighbor mixing with the nervousness rising in her throat like bitter bile. 37th floor. The door opened to a world she knew only from photographs in business magazines. Ryan Valenti's panoramic office occupied the entire floor, with windows that embraced New York City as if the city were private property. Down below, Wall Street traffic crawled like an anthill, but up here the silence was so dense that Hannah could hear her own heartbeat. The secretary, an elegant middle-aged woman with a slightly disguised southern accent, led her through corridors that seemed more museum than office. Paintings by American artists that Hannah recognized from auction catalogs decorated impeccable white walls. Everything there breathed power and calculated intimidation. Ryan Valenti had his back turned when she entered the main room, observing the city through the window like an emperor contemplating his domains. Hannah had a few seconds to study him before he turned around. Tall, broad shoulders that perfectly filled the custom navy blue suit, dark hair with a few silver strands at the temples that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy decisions. When he finally turned, Hannah felt the impact of those grey eyes like a punch to the stomach. "Miss Adams." His voice was deep, controlled, with a coldness that made the words sound like blades. Punctual, that's rare these days. Hannah tilted her head in respectful greeting, but kept her gaze firm. "Mr. Valenti, thank you for the opportunity." He walked around the desk, each step deliberate, studying her like someone evaluating an acquisition. Hannah knew she was being tested from the first second, and she strived to maintain an upright posture, hands relaxed at her sides. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, memorizing every detail about Valenti digital security, about the CEO's habits, about the questions he usually asked in interviews, but nothing had prepared her for his physical presence. Ryan Valenti radiated an authority that seemed to emanate from his pores, a mixture of absolute confidence and something darker that Hannah couldn't identify. There were stories about him in the corridors of technology companies. They said he had never lost a negotiation, that he could read people like programming code, that he maintained a calculated distance from anything that might threaten his control. "Your resume is interesting," he said, picking up a folder on the desk without taking his eyes off her. "Linguistics with a specialization in data analysis, experience in smaller companies, but with consistent results. Impeccable recommendations." A pause. Perhaps too impeccable. Hannah felt a drop of sweat forming between her shoulder blades. "Sir?" "Nothing." Ryan closed the folder with a sharp movement. "Tell me about your family." The question caught Hannah off guard. She had expected questions about technical skills, about schedule availability, about professional ambitions. Not about the family she had spent years trying to forget. "I don't have close family," she replied with a firm voice. "My mother raised me alone until I was 12. After that, I grew up with distant relatives." "And your father?" "Never knew him." Ryan nodded as if the answer confirmed something he already knew. He began to walk again, now in circles around Hannah, who remained motionless in the center of the room. She could feel his gaze evaluating every detail, the quality of the fabric of her blouse, the simple but well-kept cut of her hair, the shoes that were good but not expensive. "The position of personal assistant requires absolute discretion," he said, stopping directly in front of her. "You will have access to information that can affect entire markets, decisions that influence thousands of jobs, secrets that some people would kill to discover." Hannah swallowed hard but maintained a neutral expression. I understand the responsibility, Mr. Valenti. Do you? He took another step closer, invading her personal space. Hannah could smell his cologne now, something woody and expensive that made her head spin slightly. Do you understand that you'll work 16 hours a day when necessary? That you'll cancel personal commitments without question? That your private life will cease to exist? Yes. And why do you want this? The question Hannah had rehearsed 1,000 times in front of the mirror. The rehearsed answer was on the tip of her tongue. Professional growth, unique opportunity, admiration for the company. But when she opened her mouth, something different came out. Because I need it. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Need it? Hannah bit her inner lip, cursing her own honesty. I need a fresh start. I need to prove to myself that I can be here. For a moment, something like surprise passed through Ryan's grey eyes, as if he hadn't expected honesty, as if he were used only to calculated answers and disguised ambitions. Interesting, he murmured, returning behind the desk. Most people tell me they want to grow, that they seek challenges, that they dream of being part of something bigger. You simply need. Hannah didn't respond. She had learned early that sometimes silence says more than 1,000 words. Ryan opened a drawer and pulled out a contract. The probationary period is 90 days. During this time I can dismiss you without notice and without need for justification. Do you accept? I accept. The salary is triple what you earned at your previous company. Hannah blinked, surprised. She had researched the company's salary standards, but that was far beyond her expectations. And there are specific conditions, Ryan continued, his voice returning to its cold and controlled tone. You answer only to me. You don't discuss my decisions. You don't question my methods. You don't share information with anyone, not family, not friends, not boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend. Better that way. He extended the contract. Hannah took it, quickly flipping through the pages dense with legal text. There were confidentiality clauses that seemed more appropriate for government contracts than for an administrative position. Fines that would leave her in debt for years if she violated any term. Restrictions that would practically transform her into company property. Any questions? Ryan asked, watching her read. Hannah looked up. Why me? What do you mean? There were 10 candidates on the final list. All with more experience, better connections, more impressive resumes. Why choose precisely the one who needs it most? Ryan leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. Perhaps because the one who needs it most is the one who will betray me least. The word betrayal hung in the air between them like a veiled threat. Hannah felt a shiver run down her spine but didn't look away. Or perhaps, Ryan continued, a half smile touching his lips, because you're the only one who didn't try to impress me. You didn't smile too much, didn't agree with everything I said, didn't pretend this is the job of your dreams. Hannah signed the contract without further hesitation. When she handed back the pages, Ryan's fingers brushed against hers for a moment. The touch was brief, but she felt an electric charge run up her arm. Welcome to Valenti, Hannah. It was the first time he had used her first name, and the way he pronounced each syllable made something contract in her stomach. We start tomorrow at 7 in the morning. Martha will show you your desk and explain the basic procedures. I hope you get a good night's sleep because it will be the last one for a while. Hannah stood up, smoothing her skirt. Mr. Valenti. Yes. Thank you for the opportunity. I won't disappoint you. Ryan laughed, a low sound without humor. Hannah, everyone disappoints me sooner or later. The question is how much damage they can cause before that. She left the office with the words echoing in her head like a presage. In the elevator, she observed her reflection multiplied in the mirrors again. This time, however, all versions of Hannah Adams seemed to carry the weight of the same certainty. There was no turning back. The first days at Valenti were a total immersion in a universe that functioned like a living and relentless organism. Hannah arrived at 7 in the morning and left after 10 at night, carrying stacks of documents she needed to review at home. Ryan Valenti was a demanding boss on the verge of cruelty, but also brilliant in a way that left Hannah constantly impressed. He conducted meetings like a maestro conducting an orchestra, anticipating arguments, disarming opposition, transforming conflicts into opportunities. Hannah observed everything from her strategically positioned desk in the corner of the room, taking notes, organizing schedules, learning to decipher his moods through almost imperceptible signs. When Ryan drummed his fingers once on the table, it meant impatience, twice irritation. 3 times it was better to cancel all appointments for the day because the storm was coming. When he loosened his tie, he was considering a change in strategy. When he ran his hand through his hair, there was something worrying him beyond business. "Hannah, I need the fourth quarter reports in 20 minutes, he said on a particularly tense afternoon, without raising his eyes from the computer screen. "They've been on your desk for 15 minutes, sir." Ryan raised his head, slightly surprised. It was the 3rd time that week that Hannah had anticipated his needs, and it was beginning to bother him in a way he couldn't explain. The ExxonMobil contracts. Reviewed and organized by priority, the critical points are highlighted in yellow. And the meeting with the Koreans. Rescheduled for Thursday. I secured an interpreter specialized in technology contracts and reserved the room with video conference equipment. Ryan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Are you trying to impress me, Hannah?" "I'm trying to do my job." "Your job is to do what I say, when I say it." "And I do." Hannah raised her eyes from the documents she was organizing. "Just in advance." There was a moment of silent tension. Ryan wasn't accustomed to employees who weren't intimidated by his authority, and Hannah wasn't accustomed to bosses who seemed bothered by efficiency. "Go home," he said finally. "Sir?" "It's almost 11 at night. Go home." Hannah hesitated. "But I still need to finish." "Go home." She arranged her desk in silence, stored the documents in the safe, turned off the computer. Ryan continued working, but Hannah could feel that he was observing her every movement through the reflection in the window. "Hannah." She stopped at the door. "Yes, sir?" "Do you live far away?" The question caught her off guard. In 3 weeks of working together, Ryan had never shown personal interest in her life. Brooklyn Heights, about 6 subway stops. He nodded and returned to his computer. "Have a good night." Hannah left the building with a strange feeling in her chest. There was something in the way Ryan had asked about her home, a subtle concern that didn't match the cold image he cultivated. During the subway journey, she found herself rethinking every interaction of the day, looking for signs that he was beginning to trust her. Trust was fundamental to her plan. Hannah hadn't lied when she said she needed that job, but her reasons went far beyond financial need. For 3 months, she had obsessively researched the Valenti family, collecting newspaper clippings, old interviews, public records. There was a connection between her missing mother and the deceased Valenti matriarch, a connection that Hannah was determined to discover. Melanie Adams had worked as a housekeeper in wealthy family homes during the 90s. Hannah had few clear memories of her mother, but she remembered always impeccable uniforms, calloused hands that smelled of cleaning products, whispers on the phone late at night, and she remembered the day when Melanie simply didn't come home. 12 years old. Hannah was 12 when she woke up alone in the tiny Greenwich Village apartment, waiting for a mother who never appeared again. The neighbors called child services, who sent her to distant relatives in New Jersey. For years, Hannah believed she had been abandoned by a mother who couldn't care for a daughter. Until, by chance, she found Melanie Adams' name on a list of employees involved in the Valenti case. The family matriarch, Isabella Valenti, had died under suspicious circumstances 27 years ago. Accidental fall down marble stairs at the mansion in the Hamptons, according to official reports. But there were rumors of family quarrels, of financial secrets, of employees who disappeared soon after the event. Melanie Adams' name was on a list of people the police wanted to interrogate, but who were never found. Hannah spent months trying to access the case files, but everything was sealed or had disappeared. The only way to discover the truth was to get close to the source. Close to Ryan. He was 12 years old when his mother died, the same age Hannah was when Melanie disappeared. There was something poetically cruel in this coincidence, as if fate were playing with the two orphaned children who now found themselves as adults in a game of cat and mouse. Hannah's apartment in Brooklyn Heights was a small studio on the 10th floor of a building from the 70s. The windows faced a dark inner courtyard, but the rent fit the budget and the location was convenient. She opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer, and sat on the sofa bed, surrounded by documents she had secretly copied from the office. Ryan Valenti was an enigma in layers. Publicly, he was the brilliant CEO who transformed a digital security company into a global empire. Privately, he was a man who didn't maintain lasting relationships, who lived alone in a penthouse in the Upper East Side, who collected contemporary art and never gave interviews about his personal life. Hannah opened her laptop and accessed the files she had managed to copy during the last week. Financial reports, correspondence with clients, confidential contracts, all perfectly legal, but nothing that helped her understand the connection with her mother. It was almost 1 in the morning when her phone vibrated. Message from an unknown number. Still awake, Hannah frowned. Who is this? Your boss. You left your badge on the desk. Her heart raced. Ryan had managed to get her personal number, which wasn't difficult considering it was in the HR files, but why was he sending a message? At this hour? I can pick it up early tomorrow, she replied. I'm at the office. I can bring it to you. Hannah looked around the tiny apartment with clothes scattered on the chair and sensitive documents on the table. The idea of Ryan there in her personal space made her feel exposed in a dangerous way. No need to bother. See you tomorrow. She turned off the phone and watched the screen for a few minutes, waiting for another message. Nothing. She put the documents in a folder hidden behind books and went to take a shower, trying to shake off the feeling that she was being watched. The next day, Ryan acted as if nothing had happened. He greeted Hannah with his usual formality, dictated correspondence, conducted meetings, but there was something different in the air, a new tension that made Hannah hyper-aware of every movement. During the meeting with regional directors, she noticed that Ryan was watching her through the reflection in the window. When she served coffee to clients, she felt his gaze following her gestures. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Hannah had grown up learning to perceive signs of danger. Hannah, I need you to organize my schedule for next week, Ryan said, when the last visitors left. Cancel all social commitments, keep only essential meetings. Any specific reason? I have a project that will require total concentration. Hannah nodded and started typing on the computer. May I know what kind of project? To prioritize the meetings appropriately. Ryan stopped writing and observed her. You're curious, Hannah. I'm organized. It's different. Is it? There was something challenging in the question, as if he were testing her once more. Hannah saved the document and turned to face him directly. Mr. Valenti, if there's something about my work that isn't meeting your expectations. On the contrary, he stood up and walked to the window. You consistently exceed my expectations. And that makes me curious. Hannah felt her blood quicken. Curious about what? About who you really are. The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken meanings. Hannah knew she was at a crossroads. She could retreat, maintain the facade of an efficient and discreet assistant, or she could step forward into the unknown territory that Ryan was offering. Who do you think I am? She asked. Ryan smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Someone with secrets. Everyone has secrets. True, but not everyone is so good at hiding them. Hannah stood up, walking until she was beside him at the window. New York City stretched below them like a sea of lights and possibilities. She could feel the heat emanating from his body, the tension vibrating in the air between them. And you, Mr. Valenti? What secrets do you hide? Ryan turned his head to look at her, and for the first time since they had met, Hannah saw something. Vulnerable in those grey eyes. A crack in the armor he wore so perfectly. More than you can imagine, he said softly. The moment was broken by the sound of the phone ringing. Ryan answered with his usual professional voice, but Hannah noticed that his hands trembled slightly. She returned to her desk, but continued to feel the weight of his gaze on her for the rest of the afternoon. That night, while organizing papers for the next day, Hannah found a sealed envelope on her desk. Her name was written in an elegant handwriting that she recognized as Ryan's. Inside there was only a card with an address in the Upper East Side and a time, 9 o'clock. Hannah looked around the empty office. Ryan had left an hour ago for a meeting, but had left that mysterious invitation behind. She could ignore it, pretend she never saw it, keep the relationship on the safe professional tracks they had established. Or she could accept the invitation and discover where that growing tension between them was leading. She put the card in her purse and finished organizing the documents. At 8:30, she was standing in front of an elegant building in the Upper East Side, observing the luxurious lobby and wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The doorman recognized her by name and directed her to the private elevator that led directly to the penthouse. During the ascent to the 25th floor, Hannah mentally rehearsed all the excuses she could give to leave immediately. But when the doors opened directly into Ryan Valenti's living room, all words were lost. The penthouse was a perfect reflection of the man who inhabited it. Elegant, controlled, impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Carefully selected works of art decorated white walls. Everything was impeccable, but there was a coldness in the environment that made Hannah feel as if she were visiting a museum instead of a home. Ryan was standing near the windows, wearing jeans and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. It was the first time Hannah had seen him outside the formal office environment, and the change was disconcerting. He seemed younger, more accessible, but also more dangerous. "You came," he said without turning around. "You doubted?" "Yes." Hannah walked around the room, observing the paintings, the carefully chosen furniture, the total absence of personal objects. "Interesting house. It's just a place to sleep." "And where do you really live?" Ryan finally turned to face her. "Good question." He approached a discreet bar in the corner of the room and served 2 glasses of a whiskey that probably cost more than Hannah's previous monthly salary. "Why did you invite me here?" she asked, accepting the glass. "Because I want to understand you." "And what specifically do you want to understand?" Ryan took a sip of whiskey, watching her over the rim of the glass. "Why a woman with your talent and education was working at an insignificant company for a fraction of what she's worth. Why you don't have family, close friends, lasting relationships. Why I sometimes catch you watching me as if you're trying to solve a puzzle." Hannah felt the whiskey burn her throat, "Maybe because you are a puzzle. I'm an open book, successful businessman, single by choice, workaholic. There's no mystery, isn't there?" Hannah approached the bookshelf, running her fingers over the titles. Philosophy, history, classical literature. No business books, nothing related to technology. "And this library, these paintings, this house that you say is just a place to sleep, but is decorated as if each object was chosen to tell a story." Ryan watched her explore the space, intrigued by how she seemed to read between lines that he thought he had hidden well. "You're too observant for an assistant, and you're too complex for a businessman." They stared at each other across the room, 2 players in a game whose rules were still being written. Hannah knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but there was something magnetic about Ryan that prevented her from retreating. "I have a proposal," Ryan said, finishing his whiskey and putting the glass on the table. "What kind of proposal?" "Dinner. Tomorrow night. A special place I want to show you." Hannah hesitated. "Mr. Valenti?" "Ryan. Here, you can call me Ryan." The name sounded strange coming from her mouth. Too intimate, too personal. "Ryan, this is not a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Because this can complicate our professional relationship. Because you're afraid of me?" The question caught her off guard. "Afraid? No." "Then what are you afraid of?" Hannah put her glass on the table, the whiskey still untouched. "Of myself." The honesty of the response seemed to surprise them both. Ryan took a step toward her, and Hannah felt the air become denser. "Hannah, I need to go." She headed for the elevator, but Ryan reached her before she could press the button. "Wait." His hand touched her arm, and Hannah felt an electric shock run through her entire body. She turned to face him, and suddenly they were very close. Too close. "The dinner," Ryan said softly. "It's just dinner." Hannah looked into his eyes and saw something that made her tremble. Desire, yes, but also vulnerability. As if he were offering himself for something that went far beyond a meal. "Just dinner," she repeated. "Just dinner." "And if I say no?" "Then it will be no." Hannah studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of subtle pressure. But all she saw was a man who was asking, not demanding. "All right," she said finally, "just dinner." The smile that lit up Ryan's face was genuine, almost childlike. "All right." In the descending elevator, Hannah wondered what the hell she had just done. She was there to discover secrets, to find clues about her family's past, not to become emotionally involved with the man who might have all the answers she was looking for. But when the doors opened on the ground floor and she stepped out into the warm New York night, Hannah already knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. From now on, everything would be more complicated, more dangerous, more real. And a part of her that should have been scared was, in fact, eager to discover where that road would lead her. Hannah spent the entire day trying to focus on work, but her thoughts constantly returned to the dinner. Ryan was quieter than usual, conducting meetings with his customary efficiency, but Hannah noticed that he was watching her differently. There was a new intensity in his gaze, as if he were trying to decipher a code that she represented. At 5 in the afternoon, he approached her, desk with a sealed envelope. "The address and instructions for tonight," he said, placing the envelope next to her keyboard. "We'll meet at 8. Hannah picked up the envelope, feeling the texture of the expensive paper between her fingers. "Can I know where we're going?" "I prefer it to be a surprise." After Ryan left the office, Hannah opened the envelope with slightly trembling hands. Inside was a card with an address in the Hamptons and a single instruction: "Wear something elegant. The driver will be waiting at 6:30. The Hamptons. Hannah felt a chill down her spine. The seaside town where Isabella Valenti had died, 27 years ago. Coincidence? Unlikely. Ryan didn't do anything by chance. She put the card in her purse and finished her workday on autopilot, her mind working feverishly. Why would Ryan take her there of all places? Did he know something about her investigation, or was it just another layer of the psychological game that had begun between them? At home, Hannah opened her closet in despair. She didn't have many elegant options, and certainly nothing appropriate for dining with a billionaire in the Hamptons. She was considering cancelling when she remembered the small box stored at the bottom of the dresser drawer, her mother's inheritance. The few things that Melanie had left behind and that Hannah had managed to rescue before being taken by child services. A simple silver ring, some yellowed photographs, and a necklace that always seemed too expensive for a housekeeper to own. Hannah picked up the piece with careful fingers. It was a vintage necklace with an emerald pendant surrounded by small diamonds, mounted in white gold. For years she had wondered how Melanie had gotten it. Now, with everything she had discovered about the connection with the Valentis, the piece took on a darker meaning. She chose a simple but well-cut black dress that she had bought for a job interview years ago. With the necklace, the outfit gained an unexpected elegance. Hannah looked in the mirror and for a moment saw traces of her mother in her own reflection, the same dark eyes, the same determination in the chin. "What were you doing in that house?" "Mom?" she whispered to the mirror. The driver Ryan had sent was discreet and professional, driving a black Mercedes through New York traffic toward the highway. During the 2-hour journey to the Hamptons, Hannah tried to control her growing nerves. She was about to enter the territory where everything had begun, wearing a necklace that probably had connections to secrets buried for decades. The road snaked through the countryside as the sun set, tinting the sky with orange and pink hues. Hannah watched the landscape through the window, imagining how many times her mother had made that same journey. Melanie worked in wealthy family homes, traveled constantly. Had she traveled that same road on the night Isabella Valenti died? The E restaurant was in an isolated property on top of a hill, surrounded by illuminated gardens that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. It was small, exclusive, the kind of place that didn't appear in tourist guides because it didn't need to. Hannah recognized some familiar media figures as she was led through the main hall to a private terrace. Ryan was already waiting, wearing a dark suit that enhanced his grey eyes. When he saw her approaching, he stood up, and Hannah noticed how his eyes traveled from the dress to stop at the necklace. For a fraction of a second, she swore she saw something like shock on his face. Hannah. He kissed her hand formally, but she felt his fingers tremble slightly upon touching her skin. You look beautiful. Thank you. She sat in the chair he pulled out for her. The place is impressive. It's private, belongs to my friend Edward. I thought you'd appreciate the privacy. The terrace offered a spectacular view of the mountains, covered with lights from houses scattered like terrestrial stars. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine trees and flowers, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Hannah tried to focus on the beauty of the environment, but couldn't ignore the fact that they were just a few miles from the former Valenti property. How did you meet the owner? She asked as the waiter served champagne. Edward and I studied together. We were close as children. Ryan swirled the glass between his fingers. We drifted apart after my mother died. Hannah swallowed hard. He had mentioned his mother's death casually, but there was tension in his voice. Do you want to talk about it? Ryan observed her for a long moment. I usually don't talk about my family with employees. But I'm not just an employee, am I? The question hung in the air between them. Ryan tilted his head, a half smile touching his lips. No, you definitely aren't just an employee. Dinner arrived, lamb with fine herbs, accompanied by a red wine that probably cost more than Hannah's rent. They ate, in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Hannah was hyper-aware of the necklace around her neck, of the symbolic weight it carried. That necklace, Ryan said suddenly, making Hannah almost choke on the wine. It's an interesting piece. It was my mother's. Your mother had good taste. She worked for wealthy families. Sometimes she received gifts. Ryan nodded, but Hannah noticed that he couldn't take his eyes off the necklace. There was something in his expression that made her uneasy, as if he were seeing a ghost. Your mother, you said she disappeared when you were 12. Yes. And you never knew what happened? Hannah put down her fork, her appetite disappearing. Why all these questions about my family? Curiosity. You don't do anything out of curiosity. Everything has a purpose. Ryan laughed, a low sound without humor. You know me well for such a short time together. You're not as complicated as you think. No? Hannah leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. You're a man who learned early to control everything around you because you couldn't control what mattered most. Your mother's death left you with the feeling that the world is unpredictable and dangerous. So you built an empire based on surveillance and control. But beneath all that armor, you're still that 12-year-old boy trying to understand what happened. The silence that followed was dense, loaded. Ryan watched her with an intensity that made Hannah feel exposed, as if he were seeing straight through her defenses. And you? He asked finally. Are you also a 12-year-old girl trying to understand what happened? Hannah felt her heart quicken. Maybe. And what do you think happened? The question was loaded with hidden meanings. Hannah knew she was walking a tightrope, that one wrong word could destroy all the trust she had built. I think sometimes people disappear because they know things they shouldn't know. Ryan leaned back in his chair, watching her with renewed attention. That's very specific. It's a possibility. Based on what? Hannah took a deep breath. It was now or never. Based on the fact that my mother was working in a house in the Hamptons in the summer of 1997, and a few weeks later she disappeared. The effect of the words was immediate. Ryan froze. The wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. His eyes narrowed, studying every detail of Hannah's face. 1997, he repeated slowly. Yes. Which house? Hannah hesitated for a fraction of a second. The Valenti property. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan placed the glass on the table with excessive care, as if trying to control every movement to avoid exploding. You lied to me. I didn't lie, I just didn't tell the whole truth. You infiltrated my company with hidden purposes. Yes. The brutal honesty of the response seemed to disarm him. Ryan had expected denials, excuses, attempts to minimize the situation, not this direct confession. Why? Because I need to know what happened to my mother, and you're the only living person who might have those answers. Ryan stood up abruptly, walking to the terrace balustrade. Hannah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands repeatedly closed and opened. You don't know what you're doing, Hannah. I know exactly what I'm doing. You don't. He turned to face her, and there was something wild in his eyes. You're messing with things that were buried for a reason. What reason? To protect people. What people? Ryan walked back to the table but didn't sit down. He stood next to Hannah's chair, close enough that she could feel the heat emanating from him. Your mother was in the house that summer, he said softly. Melanie Adams, temporary housekeeper, hired to help during the season. Hannah felt the world stop. He knew, he had always known. Do you remember her? I remember a dark-haired woman who secretly gave me cookies, who let me help in the kitchen, when my mother was indisposed. Indisposed? Ryan hesitated. My mother drank a lot, especially that summer. There were tensions in the family, financial problems, suspicions of infidelity. My father traveled constantly. She felt abandoned. Hannah absorbed the information, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle. And my mother. Your mother was kind, careful. She tried to protect everyone. My mother from her own drinking binges, me from the outbursts of anger, my father from the gossip of the employees. But something went wrong. Ryan sat down heavily, suddenly looking older. On the night of August 23rd, my mother fell down the marble stairs of the main entrance, instant death. And my mother disappeared the same night. Hannah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. She ran away, or was sent away, or Ryan didn't finish the sentence. Or what? Or knew, something she shouldn't have known. Hannah's words came back to haunt her. She had said the same thing minutes before without knowing how close to the truth she was. What could she have known? Ryan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration that Hannah had learned to recognize. My mother didn't die in an accident, Hannah. The world stopped. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. How do you know? Because I saw. The two words were pronounced so softly that Hannah almost didn't hear them. Ryan was looking at his own hands as if seeing blood on them. You were there? I was 12 years old, couldn't sleep. Left my room to get water in the kitchen and heard raised voices coming from the main hall. He paused, taking a deep breath. My mother was at the top of the staircase, arguing with someone. She was drunk, staggering. The other person's voice was low, I couldn't make out the words. Hannah leaned forward, her heart beating so hard she was sure Ryan could hear it. And then she fell. But it wasn't a stumble, Hannah. She was pushed. The silence that followed was interrupted only by the distant sound of music coming from the main hall of the restaurant. Hannah felt as if she were on an emotional roller coaster, each revelation taking her deeper into an abyss that she wasn't sure she wanted to explore. Did you see who pushed her? It was dark. There was only moonlight coming through the windows. I saw a silhouette, nothing more. Man or woman? I don't know. The person ran away when my mother fell. I ran downstairs, tried to wake her, but there was blood, so much blood. Ryan's voice broke slightly. I screamed for help. My father came, the employees came, someone called an ambulance, but it was too late. Hannah extended her hand and touched his arm. Did you tell anyone what you saw? I tried. Told my father there was someone with her, but he said I was traumatized, that I had imagined things, that it was impossible for someone to have entered the house without the security guards noticing. But you knew you hadn't imagined it. I knew, and I also knew that talking about it would only bring more problems, so I kept the secret. Ryan raised his eyes to meet hers. For 27 years. Hannah absorbed the information, trying to process all the implications. And you think my mother saw the same thing? I think your mother saw more than that. I think she knew who was there that night. And that's why she disappeared? Or was killed? The words fell between them like a bomb. Hannah felt nausea rising in her throat. For all these years, she had wondered if her mother had abandoned her because she couldn't take care of a daughter. She had never considered the possibility that Melanie had been murdered. Why did you never investigate? She asked. Because I was a child. And later, when I grew up and had resources to investigate, it was too late. The clues had disappeared. The people involved had moved away or died. And honestly, he hesitated. I was afraid of what I might discover. Afraid of what? That the murderer was someone close, someone in the family. Hannah felt a shiver run down her spine. Do you suspect someone specific? Ryan didn't answer immediately. He picked up the wine glass and took a long sip as if he needed courage. My uncle Lawrence, my father's brother, partner in the company. He was in the house that night, had free access, knew all the security codes. Why would he kill your mother? Because she discovered he was embezzling money from the company, large amounts for years. My mother may have threatened to expose him. Hannah absorbed the information, trying to organize the facts in her head. And you think my mother knew about the embezzlement? I think your mother saw Lawrence leave the house that night, and he knew she had seen. So he killed her too? Or threatened her to disappear? Lawrence had connections, resources. It wouldn't be difficult for him to make someone disappear without a trace. Hannah stood up abruptly, walking to the balustrade. The view of the mountains that minutes before had seemed romantic now appeared sinister, full of shadows and buried secrets. Why are you telling me this? She asked without turning around. Because you deserve to know the truth, and because, he paused, because when I saw you wearing that necklace, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Hannah turned to face him. What about the necklace? It was my mother's. She was wearing it the night she died. The world spun around Hannah. She instinctively raised her hand to her neck, touching the piece she had considered an innocent inheritance from her mother. That's impossible. It's a unique piece, Hannah. It was made especially for my mother by an Italian jeweler. I would recognize it anywhere. But how did my mother end up with it? That's a question I'd also like to know the answer to. Hannah removed the necklace with trembling hands, observing the piece under the candlelight. Suddenly it seemed too heavy, loaded with dark meanings. My mother wasn't a thief. I didn't say she was. Then how? Maybe she found the necklace at the fall site. Maybe it broke during the struggle, and your mother kept it as evidence. Evidence of what? That Isabella was murdered. Hannah sat down heavily, the necklace still in her hands. And if my mother had evidence, why didn't she go to the police? Because Lawrence had the police in his pocket. Half the sheriffs in the area received bribes from him to ignore certain activities of the family. What activities? Ryan hesitated again. The Valentis didn't get rich just from technology, Hannah. In the 80s and 90s, there were other businesses, less legal. What kind of businesses? Money laundering, fraudulent government contracts, trafficking in privileged information. Hannah felt as if she were discovering she had grown up next to a mafia family. And you knew this? I suspected, but only confirmed it when I took control of the company and began reviewing old records. That's when I decided to clean everything up, make the business completely legitimate. And your uncle, what happened to him? Lawrence died 5 years ago, heart attack. Convenient. Ryan watched her carefully. You think I don't know what to think. Hannah stood up, putting the necklace in her purse. I need to leave. Hannah, wait. No, this is too much. I need to process all of this. Ryan stood up too, walking over to her. You can't just leave now. Yes, I can. And afterward, come back to the office tomorrow pretending nothing happened? Hannah stopped, realizing. He was right. There was no going back. They had crossed a line, shared secrets that changed everything between them. I don't know, she admitted. Ryan came closer, until Hannah could feel the heat from his body. Hannah, what happened between our families was terrible, but that doesn't need to define what happens between us. Doesn't it? She laughed bitterly. Ryan, my mother might have been killed because of your family. How can I simply ignore that? You won't ignore it. We'll discover the truth. Together. The word together sounded strange, loaded with promises that Hannah wasn't sure she wanted to make. Why? She asked. Why do you want to help me? Ryan raised his hand, lightly touching her face. The touch was gentle, but Hannah felt as if she had been burned. Because since you entered my life, I feel alive for the first time in years, and because I think you feel the same thing. Hannah knew she should step back, maintain emotional distance. But there was something in Ryan's eyes, a vulnerability that echoed her own loneliness. This is madness, she whispered. I know. It can destroy everything. I know. And yet. Ryan leaned in, and Hannah knew that if she didn't move away now, there would be no turning back. But when his lips touched hers, all rational thought disappeared. The kiss was desperate, full of years of loneliness and unanswered questions. Hannah lost herself in the taste of him, in the way his hands tangled in her hair, in the silent promise that she was no longer alone in this search for truth. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Ryan rested his forehead against hers, and Hannah could feel his heart beating uncontrollably. This changes everything, she said. I know. We can't go back. We don't want to go back. Hannah knew he was right. Despite all the risks, all the complications, she didn't want to retreat. For the first time in her life, she felt she wasn't facing the demons of the past alone. And now, she asked, now we discover the truth, no matter where it leads us. During the journey back to New York, Hannah sat in silence in the back of the Mercedes, processing everything she had discovered. Ryan sat beside her, also lost in thought. Occasionally their hands touched, a silent reminder that they had crossed a line from which there was no return. When they arrived at Hannah's building, Ryan accompanied her to the elevator door. Tomorrow might be different, he said. It will be different. Can you handle that? Hannah studied him. The powerful man who had shown himself vulnerable, the ruthless CEO who carried the secrets of a traumatized child, the boss who had become something much more dangerous. I can try. Ryan smiled, a real smile for the first time since they had met. That's all I can ask. He leaned in and kissed her forehead, a tender gesture that contrasted with the intensity of everything that had happened that night. Sleep well, Hannah. You too. In the ascending elevator, Hannah knew she wouldn't sleep. There were too many questions, too many revelations, too many sensations. But there was also hope. For the first time in years, she felt she was on the right track to discover what had happened to Melanie. And if in the process she had fallen in love with the only man who might have all the answers, well, she would deal with the consequences when the time came. The apartment seemed different when she entered, smaller, simpler, but also more real. Hannah took the necklace from her purse and observed it under the kitchen light. A jewel that had belonged to a dead woman, that had reached her through dark paths she still didn't completely understand. She put the piece in the small safe she kept hidden behind books. Tomorrow she and Ryan would start looking for answers. Together. The word echoed in her head as she prepared for a night she knew would be long and full of restless dreams. Together. After a lifetime of facing everything alone, the idea was both terrifying and liberating. Hannah lay in bed watching the city lights through the window. Somewhere out there were people who knew the truth about that night in 1997, and she would find them, no matter what it cost. But first, she needed to discover if she could trust the man who had promised to help her. the man she was falling in love with against every instinct of self-preservation, the man who could be her salvation or her downfall. Hannah arrived at the office 2 hours early the next morning, hoping to find the environment empty to process everything that had happened the night before. But when the elevator doors opened on the 37th floor, Ryan was already there, standing by the panoramic windows with a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the sunrise over New York. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and for a moment both remained motionless, separated by the spacious hall but united by everything they had shared. The golden morning light created a halo around his silhouette, but Hannah could see the marks of a sleepless night on his face. "Good morning," she said, her voice hoarser than intended. "Good morning." Ryan placed the cup on the desk and walked toward her. "Did you sleep well?" "No." "Neither did I." They observed each other in silence, two survivors of an emotional storm trying to figure out how to navigate the new territory they found themselves. Then Hannah noticed that Ryan had exchanged his impeccable suit for jeans and a button-down shirt without a tie, as if he too was trying to redefine who they were to each other. "About last night," Hannah began. "You don't regret it, do you?" The question came out more vulnerable than Ryan intended. Hannah studied his face, seeing beyond the mask of control he normally wore. There was fear there, fear that she would pull back, that the light of day would reveal that everything had been a mistake. "I don't regret the revelations," she said carefully. "Nor the kiss, but I worry about what this means. It means we're no longer boss and employee. It means we're two adults trying to discover the truth about our past." Ryan took another step closer. "And it means I can no longer pretend I don't feel something for you." Hannah felt her heart race. Ryan, I know it's complicated. I know it started as a lie on your part and a secret on mine. But what I feel is real. For me too, it's real." The words came out before Hannah could censor them. "And that scares me." "Why?" "Because when we finish discovering the truth about our mothers, maybe nothing will be left to keep us together." Ryan raised his hand, touching her face delicately. "Or maybe we'll discover we were meant to find each other." Before Hannah could respond, the sound of the arriving elevator made them quickly move apart. Martha, the secretary, came out carrying a stack of documents and stopped in surprise at seeing them there so early. "Good morning, Mr. Valenti, Hannah. Do you need anything?" "Good morning, Martha," Ryan replied, immediately returning to his professional tone. "Hannah and I are going to work on a special project today. We don't want to be interrupted unless it's an emergency." Martha nodded and headed to her own desk. Hannah observed the ease with which Ryan had changed his posture, hiding any trace of intimacy behind the business mask. It was a reminder of how skilled he was at keeping secrets. "Special project?" she asked when they were alone again. "The investigation about our mothers. I have files I've never shown anyone, documents I found when I took over the company." Ryan led her through a corridor that Hannah had never explored, passing by empty meeting rooms until they reached a steel door with an electronic lock. He typed in a long code and the door opened, revealing what appeared to be a vault transformed into a private office. The room was small but functional, with floor-to-ceiling file cabinets, a state-of-the-art computer, and a work table covered with documents organized in meticulous piles. The walls had no windows, creating a sense of total isolation from the outside world. "My sanctum sanctorum," Ryan said, noticing Hannah's expression. "Here I keep everything that shouldn't leave the family." Hannah walked around the room, observing the files labeled with dates going back to the 80s. "How long have you been collecting this information?" "Since I took control of the company, 8 years ago. When I started cleaning up the business and came across irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" Ryan pulled open a drawer and removed a thick folder. "Ghost contracts, suspicious transfers, employees who received salaries without actually working. A complex money laundering network that functioned for decades." Hannah took the folder, flipping through documents that seemed written in code. Numbers that didn't make sense, names that repeated in different contexts, dates that corresponded to events she vaguely remembered from the news. "And your father knew about all this?" "My father was complicated." Ryan sat in the chair behind the desk, suddenly looking tired. He built the company from scratch, came from a poor family in rural Michigan. When opportunities appeared, he didn't question their origin much. Illegal opportunities, mainly political, inflated government contracts, privileged information about bids, protection for businessmen who needed to clean money of dubious origin. Hannah sat in the chair across from the desk. And your mother found out. Isabella was always smarter than my father gave her credit for. She grew up in New York high society, knew how to recognize when something didn't smell right. Ryan opened another drawer and removed a yellowed envelope. I found this among her personal papers. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter dated August 1997. The handwriting was feminine, elegant, but Hannah could see the tension in the words by the way the ink spread at certain points. Dear Diary, Hannah read aloud. Today I discovered something I shouldn't have discovered. Lawrence has been embezzling money for years, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are documents in the Hampton house that prove involvement with dangerous people. People who kill for much less than a few million. I don't know who to trust anymore. Anthony travels so much that I barely see him, and when he's home, he's too nervous for serious conversations. I'm afraid Lawrence will discover that I know. I'm afraid of what he might do. Hannah looked up from the letter. She knew she was in danger. And a few days later, she was dead. And my mother saw everything. Ryan nodded gravely. Your mother was in the perfect position to be a witness. The employees always know more than the families imagine. Hannah continued reading the letter, looking for clues about Melanie's involvement. At the end, she found a reference that made her heart stop. The new housekeeper, Melanie, is different from the others. She asks intelligent questions, observes too much. Sometimes I have the impression that she's here for reasons beyond the work. Today I saw her looking at the documents in the library when she thought I wasn't watching. I need to decide if I trust her enough to ask for help. Hannah dropped the letter with trembling hands. My mother was investigating you. It seems so. But why? She was just a housekeeper. Ryan hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. Hannah, I found other things about your mother, things that suggest she may not have been just a housekeeper. Hannah's blood froze. What do you mean? Ryan stood up and went to a specific file, removing a folder marked Melanie Adams. Your mother had higher education, degree in accounting from NYU, spoke 3 languages fluently, not the typical profile of someone who works as a domestic. Hannah took the folder with hands that trembled slightly. Inside were documents she had never seen, university diploma, language course certificates, professional references from auditing firms. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. My mother was always a housekeeper, worked in family homes for as long as I can remember. Or that's what she wanted you to believe. Hannah stood up abruptly, walking to the opposite wall. Are you implying that my mother was some kind of spy? I'm implying that she may have been hired specifically to investigate my family, and that when she discovered too much information, she became a target. The implications of Ryan's words hit Hannah like an avalanche. If it were true, it meant that her entire life had been built on lies, that Melanie wasn't the hard-working and dedicated mother she remembered, but a woman with a hidden agenda who had abandoned her daughter to pursue mysterious objectives. Who would have hired her, she asked, her voice coming out weaker than intended. Company competitors, private investigators, maybe even federal authorities trying to build a case against my family. Hannah sat down heavily, feeling as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. So when she disappeared, it could have been because the mission ended, or because she discovered information too dangerous to leave her alive. And she abandoned me either way. The bitterness in Hannah's voice was palpable. It doesn't matter if she was a housekeeper or a spy, she left me behind. Ryan came around the desk and knelt beside her chair. Hannah, look at me. She raised. Her eyes, and Ryan could see, contained tears there. We don't know the whole truth yet, and even if your mother had other motivations, that doesn't diminish the love she felt for you. I remember her talking about you. She carried your photo in her wallet, showed it to anyone who wanted to see. How can you be sure? Because I saw her do it, several times. She talked about you with so much pride, so much longing when she was away. Hannah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That makes it all even worse. If she loved me, why didn't she come back? Maybe because she couldn't. Maybe because coming back would mean putting you in danger too. The explanation made sense, but it didn't diminish the pain of decades of abandonment. Hannah took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. We need to find out who she was working for. I agree, and I have an idea where to start. Ryan returned to the desk and opened the computer. In recent years, I've digitized all the old company documents, including employee records, outsourcing contracts, payments to external consultants. His fingers flew over the keyboard as Hannah watched screens full of data succeed one another on the monitor. Finally, he stopped at a specific spreadsheet. Here, domestic service contracts for the Hampton House, summer of 1997. Hannah leaned in to see better. The screen showed a list of hired employees: gardeners, security guards, cooks, housekeepers. Melanie's name appeared with a start date in June and expected end date in September. But look at this, Ryan pointed to a specific column. The amount paid for your mother's service was 3 times higher than that of the other housekeepers. Why? Good question, and see who authorized the payment. Hannah followed his finger to a digital signature in the corner of the screen. Lawrence Valenti. Your uncle personally hired my mother, and paid much more than he should have for a common housekeeper. So she was working for him. Or he was paying to keep her quiet about something she already knew. Hannah leaned back in her chair, trying to process yet another layer of complexity. Does this mean Lawrence knew my mother before she arrived at the house? It's possible, and if he knew her, Ryan left the sentence hanging. He would know where she is now. If she's still alive. The silence that followed was heavy. Hannah knew they had just discovered an important clue, but she also knew that Lawrence Valenti had been dead for 5 years. Another dead end in an investigation full of them. Wait, she said suddenly. If Lawrence paid my mother directly, there must be banking records. Transfers, checks, some financial evidence. Ryan smiled for the first time that morning. You think like an investigator. Let's see. They spent the next hour immersed in financial documents, tracking banking movements from Lawrence's personal account. Most of the payments were routine: employee salaries, supplier bills, personal expenses. But in August 1997, unusual transfers began to appear. Look at this, Hannah pointed to the screen. Transfer of $50,000 to an account at Bank of America, same day as your mother's death. Ryan wrote down the account number. And here, 2 more transfers in the following days, always to the same account. Can you find out whose account it is? Not directly, but I have contacts who can help. Ryan picked up the phone and made a quick call, speaking in code with someone who clearly owed him favors. When he hung up, he was smiling. My friend at the bank will check the records, should have an answer by tomorrow. Hannah stood up and walked around the small room, absorbing everything they had discovered. Ryan, if my mother was receiving money from Lawrence, this changes everything. How so? It means she could have been an accomplice, not a victim, could have helped him cover up the murder of your mother. The possibility hung in the air between them like a threat. Ryan watched Hannah process the implications, seeing pain mix with anger in her dark eyes. That would explain why she disappeared, Hannah continued. It wasn't out of fear or to protect me. It was because she had to flee. After helping a murderer. We don't know that yet, but it's the most logical explanation. Hannah stopped in front of him. Ryan, what if my mother is guilty? What if she helped kill your mother? Ryan stood up, walking until he was very close to her. Then, we'll discover the truth and deal with the consequences. But let's not draw conclusions before we have all the facts. How can you be so calm? If my mother is guilty, then she'll answer for what she did. But that doesn't change what I feel for you. Hannah stared at him, surprised. How can you be sure? Because you're not your mother, just as I'm not my uncle. Ryan touched her face softly. We're 2. People trying to discover the truth about a past we can't change. But if we discover that our families are enemies, we'll also discover that we aren't. The conviction in his voice made something calm in Hannah's chest. She leaned into his touch, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "I'm afraid of what we'll find." "So am I. But it's better to know the truth than to live with doubts." They were interrupted by the sound of the phone ringing. Ryan answered with his usual professional tone, but Hannah noticed how he stiffened during the conversation. "I understand. Yes, I'll check. Thank you." "What was it?" Hannah asked when he hung up. "That was my contact at the bank. The account Lawrence was transferring money to is still active." Hannah felt her heart race. Active how? Someone still uses that account. Regularly. The implications were clear. If someone still had access to the account that received money from Lawrence in 1997, it meant there was a living link to the past, someone who might have answers. "Can we find out who?" "Not over the phone. We need to go to the bank in person." Hannah looked at the clock. It was noon and the office was functioning normally outside that isolated room. "Can we leave now?" "We can." "But Hannah," Ryan hesitated. "When we discover who it is, our lives might completely change. Are you sure you want to continue?" Hannah thought about the 12-year-old girl who had woken up alone in that tiny apartment, waiting for a mother who never returned. She thought about the years of unanswered questions, of unfounded guilt, of loneliness. She thought about the woman she had become, strong, independent, but always with an emptiness in her chest. "I'm sure." Even knowing this might separate us, Hannah raised her eyes to meet his. Even knowing that. Ryan nodded and began to arrange the documents. "Then let's discover the truth." They left the secret room together, but Hannah knew they were walking toward revelations that could destroy any future they might have together. It was a risk she was willing to take, because for the first time in her life she felt she was close to discovering who she really was. And if in the process she lost the only man who had managed to touch her heart, well, at least she would know the truth about the woman who had left her behind. The journey to the bank was made in tense silence. Ryan drove his Porsche through New York traffic, while Hannah watched the city pass by the window, lost in thought. They had crossed so many lines in the last 24 hours that she was losing track of where the investigation ended and the personal relationship began. The bank manager, a middle-aged man with glasses that seemed too small for his face, received them in a private room. Ryan had made the meeting seem like a routine check on old transactions, but Hannah could see that the man was nervous. "Mr. Valenti, the information you're requesting is delicate. Normally we would need a court order to—" "I'm not asking for information about unrelated clients," Ryan interrupted, with the authority that came naturally to him. "I'm investigating transactions that originated from my own company's account. It's an internal audit matter." The manager nodded quickly. Of course, let me check the records." He typed on the computer for a few minutes before frowning. "Interesting. The account that received the transfers in 1997 was opened specifically for that purpose. Business name MCA Consulting." Hannah and Ryan exchanged glances. The initials corresponded to Hannah's mother's name, Melanie Collins Adams. "And the account is still active?" Ryan asked. "Yes. Regular movement. Monthly deposits varying between $5,000 and $10,000. "Deposits from where?" The manager hesitated again. "Various sources, different companies, but—" He consulted the screen once more. "All registered at the same business address." Ryan leaned forward. "What address?" "Madison Avenue, 1847, Suite 1205. Hannah wrote down the address in a notebook. "Can we have the name of the account holder?" "Melanie Collins Adams Silverman." The world stopped for Hannah. Silverman wasn't her mother's surname. Had Melanie gotten married, changed her identity, or was it just another layer of the lie? "Thank you," Ryan said, standing up. "If we need more information, we'll be in touch." They left the bank in silence, processing the discovery. In the parking lot, Hannah finally found her voice. Silverman. She adopted another surname. Or got married. "After abandoning me?" The bitterness was back in Hannah's voice. "Rebuilt her life while I grew up, thinking it was my fault she left." Ryan stopped beside the car, watching her. Hannah, no. Don't try to comfort me. There's no comfort for this. She turned to face him, tears running down her face. Do you understand what this means? It means my mother is alive, Ryan. Alive and receiving money for over 20 years while I thought she was dead. We don't know the whole story yet. We know enough. She abandoned me, period. Ryan opened the car door for her. Shall we go to the Madison Avenue address? Hannah hesitated. She was furious, hurt, but also desperately curious. Let's go. The building on Madison Avenue was a common commercial building from the 80s, with a smoky glass facade and an air of elegant decadence. Suite 1205 was on the 12th floor, identified only by a discreet sign, MCA Consulting, various services. They rode up in the elevator in silence. Hannah could feel her heart beating so hard, she was sure Ryan could hear it. She was just a few meters away from discovering if her mother was alive, and she didn't know whether she wanted to hug her or scream at her. The suite door was open, revealing a simple but organized reception room. A woman of about 50, graying hair pulled back in a bun, looked up from a computer when they entered. May I help you? We'd like to speak with Melanie Silverman, Ryan said. The woman studied them carefully, and Hannah had the impression she was being evaluated. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's about an urgent personal matter. Your name? Hannah stepped forward. Hannah Adams. I'm Melanie's daughter. The effect was immediate. The woman turned pale, her hands trembling slightly over the keyboard. One moment, she murmured, quickly standing up and disappearing through a door at the back of the room. Hannah and Ryan waited, standing, the tension growing with each second. Hannah could hear muffled voices coming from the other side of the door, a quick and intense discussion. Finally, the door opened and a woman appeared. Hannah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. It was Melanie, older, with hair dyed, blonde and some wrinkles around the eyes, but definitely the mother she remembered, the woman who had left home one morning and never returned. Hannah, Melanie said, her voice breaking, my girl. But Hannah didn't move. She remained motionless, observing the woman who had defined her life by her absence. Why, was all she could say. Melanie glanced quickly at Ryan, recognizing him. You're Isabella's son. I am. And you two, Melanie seemed to understand the connection, found each other. Answer the question, Hannah said, her voice colder than Ryan had ever heard. Why did you abandon me? Melanie took a deep breath, as if preparing to tell a story she had kept for decades. Because it was the only way to keep you alive. The 4 words changed everything. Hannah felt her legs weaken, and Ryan held her by the arm. Explain, he said. Melanie led them to a smaller room, closing the door behind them. The environment was functional. A desk, some chairs, organized files on the walls, but Hannah noticed photographs on a shelf, images of her at various ages, from childhood to recently. Melanie had followed her life from a distance. I was a private investigator, Melanie began, sitting in the chair behind the desk. Specialized in corporate fraud. I was hired to investigate irregularities at Valenti Digital Security. By whom? Ryan asked. Competitors initially, but when I began to discover the connections with money laundering, I caught the attention of much more dangerous people. Hannah finally found her voice. So you were never a housekeeper? Of course I was. It was my perfect cover. Nobody suspects a domestic employee. Melanie smiled sadly. And I needed to work to support you. The investigation was freelance, in my spare hours. Until you discovered something you shouldn't have discovered. I discovered that Lawrence Valenti wasn't just embezzling money from the company. He was laundering money for a drug cartel that operated between New York and Colombia. Ryan leaned forward. That's impossible. It's the truth. Your family wasn't just business, Ryan. It was an intermediary for one of the largest drug trafficking schemes in North America. The silence that followed was sepulchral. Hannah could see Ryan processing the information, all the suspicions he had harbored for years, finally making sense. And Isabella discovered it too, Melanie continued. That's why she was killed. By Lawrence? No, Lawrence was too cowardly to kill his own sister-in-law, but he told the wrong people that Isabella was asking questions. Hannah felt nausea rising in her throat. And you saw everything? I saw men entering the house that night. I saw one of them push Isabella down the stairs, and I saw them searching for documents she had hidden. Did they find them? No, but I knew where they were. Isabella had shown me the hiding place. Ryan raised his eyes. What documents? Evidence of all the transactions, names of the Colombian contacts, distribution routes, enough evidence to bring down the entire network. And you took those documents? Melanie nodded. It was my only guarantee of life. As long as I had the evidence, they couldn't kill me. But they could kill Hannah, Ryan said, understanding. Exactly. The day after the murder, I received a message. I could run away and never return, or they would kill my daughter too. Hannah felt tears burning her eyes. So you chose to abandon me. I chose to keep you alive. Melanie stood up, walking to the window. It's been the hardest 27 years of my life. Every day I wanted to go back, take you, run far away. But they had eyes everywhere. Any move on my part would put you at risk. And the money from Lawrence? Payment for my silence. He knew I had the evidence, knew I could destroy the entire family, so he bought me. Ryan stood up abruptly. You're saying my uncle paid you to cover up my mother's murder. I'm saying your uncle paid me not to turn the evidence over to the authorities. But Hannah, Melanie turned to her daughter, I never stopped investigating, never stopped looking for evidence to put the real culprits in jail. And did you find it? Melanie smiled for the first time. The network was dismantled 3 years ago. The Colombians were arrested, the Brazilian intermediaries too. Many of the documents I anonymously delivered to the authorities came from the material Isabella had gathered. Hannah processed the information slowly. So, it's safe now. It's safe now. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones, no longer loaded with tension and secrets, but with possibilities. Hannah observed the mother she had lost and found, trying to decide if she could forgive decades of abandonment. Why didn't you look for me after the network was dismantled? She asked finally. Melanie sat back down, suddenly looking fragile. Because I was afraid you would hate me. I was afraid it was too late to be your mother again. Hannah looked at Ryan, who had remained silent throughout the conversation. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. I need time to process all of this, she said finally. Melanie nodded. I understand. You have my number. Now my address if you want to talk. Maybe later. Hannah stood up to leave, but stopped at the door. One last question. The emerald necklace, how did you end up with it? Isabella gave it to me the night she died. Said that if anything happened to her, I should give it to you when you were older. It was meant to be a reminder that some people are worth fighting for. Hannah nodded and left the room, Ryan following her. In the descending elevator, they remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. On the street, Hannah finally stopped and turned to him. You still haven't told me what you're thinking. Ryan observed her for a long moment. I'm thinking that our mothers were braver than I imagined, and I'm thinking we inherited that courage. And what are we going to do with it? We're going to decide who we want to be from now on, regardless of what our parents did or didn't do. Hannah smiled for the first time that day. And who do you want to be? Ryan came closer, touching her face gently. I want to be the man who stands by your side while you rebuild your relationship with your mother. I want to be the man you choose not because of the past, but despite it. Even knowing it's going to be complicated? Especially knowing it's going to be complicated. Hannah leaned into his touch. So are we two brave people or two crazy ones? Probably both. And for the first time since everything had begun, Hannah felt that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future together that wasn't defined by the mistakes of the past. The 2 weeks that followed the reunion with Melanie were the most confusing of Hannah's life. During the day, she tried to maintain normalcy at the office, organizing Ryan's schedule, conducting meetings, pretending that her life hadn't been turned upside down. But at night, alone in the Brooklyn Heights apartment, she found herself staring at the phone, debating whether she should call her mother. Ryan respected her space, but Hannah felt the weight of his gaze on her throughout the workday. He had changed too since the discovery of the truth. He seemed more relaxed at times, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders, but also more vigilant, as if he were constantly checking if she was okay. "Are you going to talk to her?" he asked one Thursday afternoon while they were reviewing. Contracts in the meeting room. Hannah didn't need to ask who he was talking about. "I don't know." "What's stopping you?" Hannah put the pen on the table and leaned back in her chair. 27 years of abandonment don't erase with an explanation, no matter how good it is. Even knowing she did it to protect you? Especially knowing that. Hannah stood up and walked to the window. "Because it means she made the decision for me, decided I was too weak to face the truth, too young to help fight." Ryan approached, stopping a few inches from her. "You were 12 years. Old Hannah, and she had 27 years to explain, to try to find me when it was safe, to trust me. Maybe she was afraid you wouldn't forgive her." Hannah turned to face him. "And now you've discovered she was right." The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Ryan could see the pain in Hannah's eyes, the war between filial love and decades of resentment. He knew that anything he said could be interpreted as taking sides, so he simply extended his hand. Hannah looked at the outstretched hand for a long moment before intertwining her fingers with his. The touch was comforting, an anchor amid the emotional storm she was living. "And us?" she asked softly. "What happens to us now that we know the truth? What do you want to happen?" "I want it to be simple. I want us to be just two people who fell in love." "But we're not." "No. We're two survivors of a family tragedy who found each other by chance." Hannah squeezed his hand. "And that scares me." "Why?" "Because I don't know if what I feel for you is real or if it's just the need to have someone who understands what I've been through." Ryan released her hand, an abrupt movement that made Hannah step back. There was pain in his grey eyes, a vulnerability she rarely saw. "You think I'm just your trauma companion?" "I don't know what to think, Ryan. My entire life was built on lies. How can I trust my own feelings?" Ryan walked to the other side of the room, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Then test it." "How?" "Make a decision based only on what you feel, not on what we've discovered about our past." He turned to face her. "Have dinner with me tonight. Not as investigators trying to solve a mystery, not as boss and employee, not as children of victims, just as Hannah and Ryan." Hannah studied his face, seeing beyond the mask of control he wore at the office. There was hope there, but also fear. Fear that she would discover that what she felt was merely circumstantial. "All right," she said finally. "But I choose the place." Ryan smiled and Hannah felt her chest warm. It was a genuine smile, without calculation or hidden agenda. "Where?" "My place. I'll cook." The surprise on his face was evident. "You cook?" "I had to learn. When you grow up alone, you either learn to fend for yourself or you starve." "Hannah, it wasn't self-pity, it was a fact." She returned to the table and collected the contracts. 8 o'clock. "And Ryan?" "Yes?" "Wear something comfortable. No suit." At 7:30, Hannah was as nervous as a teenager before her first date. She had spent 2 hours cleaning the tiny apartment, hiding the investigation documents, trying to make the environment seem welcoming rather than claustrophobic. The menu was simple: shrimp risotto, salad, and a bottle of red wine she had bought. On sale, but she had prepared everything with care. When the doorbell rang, Hannah took a deep breath before opening the door. Ryan was standing in the hallway wearing dark jeans and a navy blue shirt. No tie, his hair slightly disheveled. He was holding a bottle of champagne and a bouquet of white flowers. "Hi," he said, suddenly seeming younger and uncertain. "Hi." Hannah accepted the flowers, inhaling the delicate scent. "They're beautiful." "I didn't know what flowers you like." "Any are fine. I've never received flowers before." The confession escaped before Hannah could censor it, and she saw something contract in Ryan's face. "Never?" "Never had a relationship long enough for flowers." Hannah stepped aside to let him enter, Welcome to my palace." Ryan entered the small apartment, his eyes quickly scanning the environment. It was simple but welcoming, with functional furniture and some personal touches that revealed Hannah's personality. Books piled on every available surface, plants in the windows, photographs of places she had visited stuck to the refrigerator. "It's perfect," he said, and Hannah could tell he was sincere. "It's small. It's yours." The distinction touched her more than it should have. Hannah turned to the kitchen, trying to hide the emotion. "Dinner is almost ready. Want a beer?" "Please." They moved around the tiny kitchen in a careful dance, Hannah serving the risotto, while Ryan opened the beer and helped set the plates on the small dining table. There was a domestic intimacy to the scene that left them both slightly uncomfortable. "When was the last time you did this?" Hannah asked, sitting at the table. "Did what?" "Dinner at someone's home. Something normal, homie." Ryan considered the question as he tasted the risotto. "Honestly, I don't remember. For years I've only had business dinners or eaten alone." "Must be lonely." It was. Until you. The words hung in the air between them, simple but loaded with meaning. Hannah felt her heart quicken. "Ryan, sorry, I know we're trying to keep this simple. Don't apologize for being honest." Hannah took a sip of wine. "I feel less alone since I met you too. Even knowing I started as your investigation target. Especially because of that. You saw me at my worst moment, lying, manipulating, using you, and yet I fell in love with you." Hannah stopped chewing, her eyes wide. It was the first time he had used the word love. "You fell in love with me?" Ryan put his fork on the plate, suddenly serious. "Hopelessly, desperately, in a way I didn't know was possible." "Since when?" "Since the first interview, when you said you needed the job instead of wanting it. Since the first time you didn't back down when I tried to intimidate you. Since I realized you saw me as a person, not as a position or bank account." Hannah stood up abruptly, walking to the small window that faced the inner courtyard. "This changes everything." "Why does it have to change anything?" "Because now I can't pretend it's just attraction. I can't pretend that when this ends badly, it will be easy to move on." Ryan approached from behind but didn't touch her. "Why does it have to end badly?" "Because it always does. All the people who were supposed to love me end up leaving me. I'm..." "Not all people." Hannah turned to face him, tears shining in her eyes. "You're worse. You're the first person I've allowed myself to feel something real for. And that's bad. It's terrifying." Ryan raised his hands, touching her face delicately. "Hannah, look at me." She obeyed, even with teary eyes. "I'm not going anywhere. No matter how difficult it gets, how complicated it becomes, I'm here to stay. How can you be sure?" "Because I spent 39 years protecting myself from feeling anything real for someone. And now that I've found you, I'd rather die than lose you." The intensity of the words made Hannah tremble. She could see the truth in his grey eyes, a conviction that went beyond logic. "I love you too," she whispered. Ryan smiled, a smile that completely transformed his face. "Even knowing I'm a controlling workaholic with trust issues. Especially because of that, it perfectly matches an orphaned woman with abandonment issues." They laughed, a liberating laugh that broke the emotional tension of the moment. Ryan leaned in and kissed her, gentle at first, then with growing intensity. Hannah lost herself in the kiss, in his taste, in the silent promise that she was no longer alone. When they separated, both were breathless. "Dinner will get cold," Hannah said against his lips. "I don't care. I cooked with love." "Then let's eat. We have all night." They returned to the table, but the atmosphere had completely changed. There was lightness now, a sense of possibility that didn't exist before. They talked about everything and nothing, favorite movies, places they wanted to visit, childhood memories that didn't involve family tragedies. "What was your first job?" Ryan asked, serving more wine. "Counter clerk at a bakery at 14. Woke up at 4 in the morning to help make bread before school." "At 14, is that legal?" Hannah shrugged. The bakery owner was a friend of the family that raised me. They needed extra money. I needed to feel useful. It worked. And did you like it? Loved it. There was something comforting about making bread, seeing people buying food that I had helped prepare. It made me feel necessary. Ryan watched her talk, noticing how her face lit up when remembering positive moments from her difficult adolescence. And you? What was your first job? Intern at my father's own company at 16. Cleaned the office, organized files, made coffee for meetings. Did he treat you differently because you were his son? Worse. Had to prove twice as much as any other. Employee. I think he was afraid people would think I was there just because of nepotism. And were you? Ryan smiled. Of course I was. But I learned to work as if I wasn't. Hannah leaned back in her chair, watching him. You know what impresses me most about you? What? How you managed to become a decent person despite everything you went through, lost your mother early, grew up in a family involved with illegal business, took over an empire built on blood and corruption. And yet, you cleaned everything up, made the company legitimate, created honest jobs. It wasn't that noble. I was afraid of ending up like my uncle. That is nobility, recognizing your own demons and fighting against them. Ryan extended his hand across the table and Hannah took it naturally. And you? How did you manage to become so strong after growing up without family, without stability? I had no choice. It was either get strong or break. Many people break. I almost broke too several times. Hannah intertwined her fingers with his, especially when I started investigating about my mother. There were nights I stayed awake wondering if it would be worth discovering the truth. And now, do you still think it was worth it? Hannah hesitated. Ask me again when I decide what to do with the information I have. About your mother? About us? Ryan frowned. What do you mean? Hannah released his hand and stood up, starting to collect the plates. Ryan, what happens tomorrow? Do I go back to being your assistant? Do we pretend we didn't just declare eternal love? Why would we have to pretend? Because you're my boss. Because there are company policies about relationships between employees. Because people will talk. Ryan stood up too, preventing her from continuing to clear the table. Hannah, stop. Stop what? Stop looking for problems where they don't exist. They do exist. You just don't want to see them. Then tell me what they are specifically. Hannah took a deep breath. First, the power imbalance. You're a billionaire. I'm an employee. Second, what people will think when they find out I slept with my boss to get information. Third, you'll get tired. You'll realize I'm too complicated, too damaged, too... Ryan interrupted her by kissing her intensely. When they separated, he held her face between his hands. Stop sabotaging the only good thing that happened to both of us in years. I'm not sabotaging, I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The words hit Hannah like a slap. She moved away from him, furious. A coward? Yes. You're looking for excuses to run away before I have the chance to disappoint you. That's not what I'm... That's exactly it. Your mother abandoned you, so you learned to abandon first to avoid being hurt again. Hannah felt tears of anger burning her eyes. Don't psychoanalyze me. Then stop acting like a scared child. Go away. No. Ryan, I'm asking you to leave. And I'm refusing. Because this is exactly what you want. A fight that justifies expelling me from your life before I have the chance to stay. Hannah walked to the door, opening it. Leave. Ryan didn't move. I'll leave, but first I want you to know one thing. What? Tomorrow I'll be at the office, the day after tomorrow too, and the day after that. I'll be there every day until you decide to stop fighting against what you feel and accept that I'm not going anywhere. And if I quit, then I'll look for you at home, and if you move, I'll find you, and if you run away to another country, I'll follow. Hannah stared at him, seeing absolute determination in his eyes. Why? Because I love you. And because I know you love me too, even though you're terrified of it. Ryan walked to the door, stopping beside her. Good night, Hannah. Thank you for dinner. It was perfect. He kissed her forehead softly and left, leaving Hannah alone with her racing heart and chaotic mind. She closed the door and leaned against it, sliding to the floor. Ryan was right. She was sabotaging the relationship out of fear, but recognizing the pattern didn't make it easier to break. The phone rang, startling her. Hannah looked at the display and saw a number she didn't recognize. Hello? Hannah? It's Melanie. Hannah closed her eyes. She wasn't prepared to deal with another complicated emotional situation. Hi? Are you okay? You sound like you were crying. I'm fine. Can I come over? I know it's late, but there's something I need to tell you. Something important. Hannah looked around the messy apartment, still smelling of Ryan's cologne. What kind of thing? It's about Ryan. There are things about the Valenti family that I didn't tell you. Hannah's blood froze. What kind of things? I can't talk over the phone. Can I come over? Hannah hesitated. She didn't want to see her mother, wasn't emotionally prepared for more revelations, but the urgency in Melanie's voice worried her. All right, but it has to be quick. 20 minutes. Hannah hung up the phone and quickly began to tidy up the apartment, putting away the dishes, hiding the traces of the romantic dinner. She had a bad feeling about what Melanie wanted to tell her, and suspected that her already complicated night was about to get even worse. Melanie arrived punctually, carrying a folder of documents and a worried expression. She had exchanged the elegant office clothes for jeans and a simple blouse, looking more like the mother Hannah remembered from childhood. Thanks you for receiving me, Melanie said, entering the apartment. What's so urgent that it couldn't wait until tomorrow? Melanie sat on the sofa, placing the folder beside her. Hannah, are you romantically involved with Ryan Valenti? The direct question caught Hannah off guard. Why does that matter? Because there are things about him you don't know. Dangerous. Things? What things? Melanie opened the folder and removed a series of documents. In recent years, I've been monitoring the Valenti family to make sure the threat had really passed. And I discovered that Ryan isn't as innocent as he seems. Hannah sat in the armchair across from the sofa, crossing her arms defensively. Explain. When he took control of the company, he said he cleaned up all the illegal business, but there's evidence that he merely made them more sophisticated. What evidence? Melanie extended a series of banking documents. Suspicious transfers, contracts with shell companies, movements that suggest continuity of money laundering activities. Hannah took the documents, but didn't open them. Where did you get this? I have contacts at the IRS, at the Federal Reserve. People who owe me favors for cases I helped solve. And why are you showing me this now? Because I saw you two leaving the bank together last week. I saw the way he looked at you, and I got worried. Hannah stood up, starting to pace around the room. Worried about what? About the possibility that he's using you, just like he's used other women in the past. Other women? Melanie hesitated. Hannah, Ryan Valenti has a pattern. He gets involved with women who can be useful for his business, journalists who can plant favorable stories, lawyers who can help with legal issues, accountants who can... Stop. Hannah raised her hand. Stop right now. Hannah, listen. No. You disappeared from my life for 27 years, and now you show up wanting to tell me who I can or can't be involved with. That's not it. It's that I love you and don't want to see you getting hurt. You love me? Hannah laughed bitterly. You don't know me well enough to love me. I'm a stranger to you. You're my daughter. I'm a 31-year-old woman you abandoned when she was a child. There's a difference. Melanie stood up too, trying to approach. Hannah, I know you're hurt. Hurt? I passed the term hurt decades ago. Now I'm just tired. Tired of people showing up in my life wanting to tell me what to do. I just want to protect you. Then where were you when I needed real protection? Where were you when I had nightmares and no one to comfort me? Where were you when I worked 2 jobs to pay for college? Where were you when I cried in the bathroom because I felt completely alone in the world? The words came out like a torrent, decades of pain and resentment finally finding voice. Melanie backed away as if she had been physically hit. I was trying to keep you alive, she whispered. And you succeeded. Congratulations. Now let me live. Hannah walked to the door, opening it again. It seemed she was destined to expel people that night. I want you to leave. Hannah, please. Take your documents, your accusations, your belated concerns, and leave. Melanie slowly collected the papers, putting them in the folder. At the door, she stopped. If you're right about Ryan, then I'm sorry for interfering. But if I'm right... She hesitated. If I'm right, you'll need someone when you discover the truth. And despite everything, I'm still your mother. After Melanie left, Hannah sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by the emotional wreckage of the night. In a few hours, she had declared herself to Ryan, fought with him, received accusations about him, and expelled her mother from her home. She picked up the documents that Melanie had forgotten on the side table. Part of her didn't want to look, wanted to throw everything in the trash and pretend the conversation had never happened. But the part that had grown up investigating her own history couldn't resist. The documents were technical, full of numbers and codes she didn't completely understand. But there were patterns there, movements that really seemed suspicious. Transfers to offshore accounts, contracts with companies that existed only on paper, values that didn't make sense for the services supposedly provided. And then she saw something that made her heart stop. A transfer made 3 weeks ago, from the exact day she had been hired at Valenti. $50,000 to an account in the name of Hannah Collins Adams. She checked again. Sure, she was seeing wrong, but there it was, her full name, her social security number, a transfer she had never authorized to an account she didn't know existed. With trembling hands, Hannah picked up her cell phone and checked her online bank statement. Nothing. There was no record of a deposit in her checking account. But Melanie's documents clearly showed a transfer authorized by Ryan Valenti. 2 explanations were possible. Either Melanie had forged the documents to destroy her relationship with Ryan, or Ryan had opened an account in her name without her knowledge. Hannah looked at the clock. Almost midnight. Too late to resolve this, but too important to wait until the next day. She grabbed her car keys and headed to the address she knew by heart. Ryan's penthouse in the Upper East Side. During the journey, she tried to find innocent explanations for what she had discovered. Maybe it was a bonus Ryan had prepared as a surprise. Maybe it was an account he had opened to cover expenses related to the investigation. Maybe. But deep down, a small and cruel voice whispered that Melanie was right. That Ryan was like all other powerful men, manipulative, controlling, capable of using any means to get what he wanted. The building's doorman recognized her and directed her straight to the elevator. Hannah rode up to the penthouse with her heart beating out of control, the documents clutched in her hand. Ryan answered the door, wearing only pajama pants, his hair disheveled, clearly awakened by the sound of the doorbell. "Hannah, what happened?" She entered without being invited, walking directly to the living room. "We need to talk." Ryan closed the door, concern evident on his face. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." Hannah turned to face him, extending the documents. "Explain this." Ryan took the papers, quickly leafing through them. Hannah watched his face, looking for signs of guilt or surprise. What she saw was genuine confusion. "Where did you get this?" "Melanie brought it. Said you're not who you claim to be." Ryan continued reading, frowning. "Hannah, half of these documents are fake." "How do you know?" "Because I know my own financial records. These offshore transfers never happened. These companies don't exist." He stopped at a specific page. "And this account in your name. I never opened any account for you." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Ryan stared at her directly. "Hannah, someone is trying to separate us." "Why?" "Good question, but first we need to find out who." Hannah sat heavily on the sofa, suddenly exhausted. "And if Melanie is right, and if you're dangerous and I'm too stupid to realize it?" Ryan sat beside her, but without touching her. "Then you have every right to leave right now and never speak to me again." But you know me, Hannah. You've spent weeks working by my side, seeing how I conduct business, how I treat employees, how I handle problems. I'm many things, controlling, workaholic, sometimes arrogant, but I'm not dishonest. Hannah observed him, looking for signs of lies. But all she saw was sincerity, a raw honesty that hurt to look at. Why would someone do this? To drive us apart, to prevent us from discovering something they didn't want us to know. But we've already discovered everything. Lawrence is dead, the cartel was dismantled, the culprits are in prison. Have we really discovered everything? The question hung in the air between them. Hannah realized there were still pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit perfectly. The ease with which Melanie had obtained confidential information, the speed with which she produced documents that seemed official, the way she appeared in their lives exactly when they began to get close. "Ryan," she said slowly, "what if my mother isn't who she says she is?" "What do you mean? What if she isn't a victim but an accomplice? What if she was working with Lawrence from the beginning?" Ryan leaned back on the sofa, processing the possibility. It would explain a lot. Like how she managed to disappear so completely, how she had access to information that only someone on the inside would have, how she knew details about business she supposedly discovered by chance. And it would explain why someone wants to separate us now. If Melanie and Lawrence were partners, then she might be trying to protect secrets that haven't been discovered yet. Hannah stood up, starting to walk around the room as thoughts organized in her head. "Ryan, I need to ask something, and I want you to be completely honest. I always am. When you hired me, did you know who I was?" Ryan hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering, and Hannah felt her heart sink. "I did. From the beginning? From when I saw your name on the list of candidates." Hannah stopped walking, facing him. "Why? Why did you hire me, knowing who I was?" "Because I wanted to find out what you were looking for, and because I thought you deserved to know the truth about your mother. So you used me." "In the beginning, yes, but Hannah," Ryan stood up, walking over to her, "everything changed the moment I really got to know you. From the first day, it was no longer about investigation or discovering your plans. It was about you." Hannah backed away when he tried to touch her. "How can I believe you? How can I believe anyone?" "Because you have no choice. Because if you don't trust someone, you'll be alone forever." "Maybe it's better to be alone." "It's not, and you know that." Hannah walked to the panoramic windows, watching New York sleeping below. All the city lights seemed like unreachable stars, reminding her of how small and lost she felt. "Ryan, I love you, but I'm also terrified. I don't know who to trust anymore, what to believe, which feelings are real." Ryan approached from behind, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence. "Then trust me for tonight. Tomorrow we'll start again, investigate everything again, find out who's lying. But tonight, stay with me." Hannah turned slowly. "And if we discover we're enemies? Then we'll deal with that when the time comes. But tonight we're just two people who love each other and need each other." Hannah studied his face, seeing fatigue, concern, but also genuine love. Maybe it was madness to trust him. Maybe it was even greater madness not to trust. "One night," she said finally. "One night." Ryan extended his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Hannah took it. He led her to the bedroom, an environment as impeccably decorated as the rest of the penthouse, but which seemed more welcoming in the dim light. They lay together on the king-size bed, Hannah nestled against Ryan's chest, listening to the regular beating of his heart. They didn't make love. There was too much tension, too many unanswered questions, but they embraced like shipwrecked people clinging to a buoy in a stormy sea. "Ryan," Hannah whispered in the dark. "Yes? If we discover my mother is an enemy, we won't discover that. But if we do, then we'll face it together, like everything else." Hannah closed her eyes, allowing herself to believe for one night that everything would be all right. That love would be enough to overcome any revelation that tomorrow might bring. But deep in her mind, a small voice whispered that the storm had only just begun. Hannah woke before dawn, still nestled against Ryan's chest. For a moment, she allowed herself to pretend it was a normal morning, that she was just a woman waking up beside the man she loved. But reality imposed itself quickly when her eyes found the documents scattered on the dresser, dark reminders of the previous night's revelations. Ryan was awake, she realized, from the altered heartbeat beneath her ear. He was absent-mindedly stroking her hair, lost in thought. "How long have you been awake?" she asked softly. "A few hours. Couldn't stop thinking about what we discovered yesterday." Hannah moved slightly to look at him. The grey morning light filtered through the curtains, creating shadows on his face that accentuated the worry lines around his eyes. "Did you reach any conclusions?" "Several, none good." Ryan sat up in bed, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "Hannah, I need to tell you something I should have told you yesterday." Her stomach contracted. "What?" "When you left my apartment last week, after we discovered about your mother, I had Melanie investigated more thoroughly." Hannah sat up too, pulling the sheet to cover her body. "And what did you discover?" Ryan got up and went to the closet, returning with a folder Hannah hadn't seen before. Melanie Collins Adams died in a car accident in 2003, in Boston. The world stopped for Hannah. "What are you saying?" "The woman you met, who claims to be your mother, has been using Melanie's identity for more than 20 years. Hannah felt nausea rising in her throat. "That's impossible. She knew things about my childhood, about things anyone close to the real Melanie could know. A friend, a partner, Ryan hesitated. "A what?" "A sister." Hannah took the folder with trembling hands, leafing through documents that confirmed Melanie Adams's death. Death certificate, police report of the accident, burial record. All authentic, all official. Who is she then? "I don't know yet, but I have suspicions." Ryan sat beside her again. "Remember your mother spoke 3 languages fluently?" "Yes." "And had a degree in accounting?" Hannah nodded, still processing the devastating information. "I found records of a woman named Carmen Silverman, who worked as an accountant for several shell companies linked to the Colombian cartel in the 90s. She disappeared from official records in 1997. The same year my mother, that Melanie, died." "Exactly, and Carmen Silverman had a twin sister named Melanie." Hannah dropped the documents, feeling as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "You're saying the woman who raised me until I was 12 was a criminal using her dead sister's identity?" "I'm saying it's a possibility we need to investigate. And if it's true..." Hannah stood up abruptly, starting to pace around the room. "If it's true, it means I never knew my real mother. It means I grew up being loved by a lie." Ryan approached, trying to touch her, but Hannah moved away. "Hannah, no, don't try to comfort me. There's no comfort for this." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Do you understand what this means? It means all the happy moments of my childhood, all the loving memories I have of her were false. She was playing a role. That doesn't make the love she felt for you less real. How can you know? How can you be sure she felt anything beyond obligation or guilt?" Ryan had no answer for that. Hannah continued pacing around the room, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. "I need to confront her. Hannah, if Carmen Silverman is really who I think she is, she could be dangerous." "I don't care." "I care." Ryan blocked her path to the door. "I won't let you put yourself at risk. It's not your decision." "Yes, it is, because I love you and because I finally understood what's happening here." Hannah stopped struggling. "What do you mean?" "Carmen didn't appear in your life by chance. She knew you were investigating me, knew we were close to discovering connections between our families. So what? She appeared to control the narrative, to tell the version of the story that benefited her and prevent us from discovering the real truth." Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. What real truth? That she wasn't a victim of circumstances, that she was an active part of the money laundering scheme, and that she probably killed my mother. The words hit Hannah like physical punches. She doubled over, hugging her own stomach as if that could contain the pain spreading through her chest. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." Ryan knelt in front of her, holding her hands. "Hannah, I know it's a lot to process. You don't understand. She raised her eyes and Ryan saw pure desperation there. If she killed your mother, if she's a murderer, then I'm the daughter of a murderer. Then I have the blood of a murderer running in my veins. That's not true. How do you know? How can you be sure I won't turn into a person like her? Ryan held her face between his hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. Because I know you. I know your heart, your soul, your essence, and there's nothing cruel or violent in you. But if genetics doesn't define who you are, your choices define you, and you chose to be kind when the world was cruel to you. You chose to seek truth instead of accepting comfortable lies. You chose to love me despite all the risks. Hannah leaned into his touch, desperate for an anchor amid the emotional chaos. What do we do now? Now, we discover the whole truth. But we do it together, carefully, without putting ourselves in unnecessary danger. Hannah nodded, trying to compose herself. Where do we start? With the office. I have contacts who can confirm Carmen Silverman's real identity and discover what she's been doing for the last 20 years. They dressed in silence, each lost in dark thoughts. Hannah watched Ryan choose a dark suit, transforming himself again into the ruthless CEO the world knew. She put on the same outfit from the day before, feeling as if she were putting on armor for a final battle. During the journey to the office, Ryan made several calls, activating a network of contacts Hannah didn't know existed. Private detectives, corporate investigators, financial analysts. In half an hour, he had mobilized a small task force dedicated to discovering everything about Carmen Silverman. Do you do this regularly? Hannah asked when he hung up the last call. Do what? Investigate. People as if you were a private intelligence agency. Ryan shrugged. When you have as much money as I have, you learn that information is the best protection. I keep investigators on payroll for situations like this. Situations like discovering that the mother of the woman you fell in love with might be a murderer. Situations like discovering threats to my safety or the safety of the people I love. The word love still made Hannah's heart race, even amid everything that was happening. At the office, Ryan led her directly to the secret room where everything had begun. This time, however, he turned on additional computers, opened files Hannah had never seen, transformed the environment into an investigation command center. Impressive, she commented, watching him work. Paranoia developed over decades of running, a company that used to have powerful enemies. The first report arrived by email, and an hour later, Ryan read it in silence, his face becoming progressively darker. What is it? Hannah asked. Carmen Silverman disappeared from official records in August 1997, but there are unofficial records of her presence in New York during that summer. Working for Lawrence? Working with Lawrence as a partner, not an employee. Hannah felt her stomach contract. Partner in what? In the money laundering scheme. She was the accountant who made the transactions impossible to trace. And my mother, the real Melanie. Ryan hesitated before answering. According to this report, Melanie Adams discovered her sister's illegal activities and threatened to report her to the authorities, so Carmen killed her. The car accident that killed Melanie wasn't an accident, it was sabotage. Hannah sat heavily, absorbing another layer of horror. And then she assumed her sister's identity and raised me for... what? Guilt? Or because you were useful for her cover. A single mother working as a housekeeper is less suspicious than a woman living alone with a lot of money from no apparent source. So I was an accessory, a part of the disguise. Ryan approached her chair. Hannah, even if it started that way, it's impossible to fake love for a child for 12 years. Regardless of who she was, what crimes she committed, I'm sure she came to truly love you. How can you be sure? Because I saw her leave you. I saw how she said goodbye to you the night before she disappeared. Hannah raised her head, surprised. You saw? I was at my bedroom window when she left the house that early morning. She stopped in the garden, looked up at the window of the room where you were sleeping, and cried. She stood there for several minutes, just crying. The image touched a sensitive chord in Hannah's heart. As monstrous as Carmen might be, there was something genuine in that moment of farewell. But she still abandoned me, because she knew the life she had built was crumbling, and because, contrary to what you thought all these years, she really tried to protect you. A second email arrived, interrupting the conversation. Ryan opened it and turned pale. What is it now? Carmen Silverman didn't completely disappear in 1997. There are records of her working for different criminal organizations for the last 20 years. Money laundering, corporate fraud, document forgery. She continued being a criminal, and a very successful one. She moved millions of dollars for drug cartels, militias, corrupt politicians. Ryan turned to Hannah. And there's something else, something worse. What could be worse? There are contracts with your name on them from the last 6 months. Hannah felt her blood freeze. What kind of contracts? Investigation and neutralization of threats. It seems Carmen was hired to prevent certain information from coming to light. Information about what? About the Valenti family's illegal businesses that weren't discovered during the official investigations. Hannah stood up abruptly. You're saying she was hired to investigate us? I'm saying she was hired to stop our investigation, by any means necessary. The implications were terrifying. Carmen hadn't appeared in Hannah's life out of maternal remorse or desire for reconnection. She had appeared to control and manipulate, perhaps even to permanently silence any threat to the secrets she kept. Ryan, if she's as dangerous as these reports suggest, then we're in danger, both of us. As if on cue, Hannah's phone rang. She looked at the display and saw the name she didn't want to see, Melanie Carmen. Don't answer, Ryan said immediately, but Hannah had already accepted the call. Hello? Hannah, darling, I need to see you today, it's urgent. The voice sounded different, less maternal, more calculating. Hannah signaled to Ryan, who began recording the conversation. Why? Because there are people looking for me. Dangerous people. And they know about you. What people? Lawrence's old partners. It seems some business wasn't completely closed when he died. Hannah exchanged glances with Ryan. What kind of business? I can't talk over the phone. Let's meet at the same place as yesterday, 1 o'clock. Carmen. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What did you call me? Hannah took a deep breath. Carmen Silverman. I know who you really are. The silence that followed was icy. When Carmen spoke again, all maternal pretense had disappeared from her voice. Interesting. And how much more do you know? I know my real mother is dead. I know you assumed her identity. I know you worked with Lawrence Valenti in money laundering schemes. And even knowing that, you'll meet me. I will. Why? Hannah looked at Ryan, seeing concern and fear in his eyes. Because I need to hear the truth from your mouth. All the truths. Very well. But come, alone. No. Hannah, either I come accompanied or I don't come at all. Your choice. Carmen laughed, a sound without humor. Fine. Bring your billionaire boyfriend. But know that if there's any surprise, any attempt to turn me over to the authorities, you'll both pay the price. The call ended, leaving Hannah and Ryan in tense silence. We're not meeting with her, Ryan said immediately. Yes, we are. Hannah, she just directly threatened us. And it was the first honest thing she's said since she reappeared in my life. Hannah stood up, determination growing in her chest. Ryan, I need to end this. I need to look in the eyes of the woman who raised me and hear the whole truth, no matter how terrible it is. It's too dangerous. Everything in my life has been too dangerous. Growing up without family, investigating buried secrets, falling in love with you. She held his face between her hands. But I survived everything, and I'll survive this too. Ryan covered her hands with his own. Then we'll go prepared. What? Do you mean? I mean, if we're going to meet with a professional assassin, we won't go unarmed. The next 2 hours were spent in preparations Hannah never imagined she would make. Ryan had contacts in private security agencies who provided discreet protection equipment, bulletproof vests thin enough to be worn under normal clothes, communication, devices, even a small gun that Hannah quickly learned to handle. Have you done this before? She asked as Ryan checked his own gun with worrying familiarity. When you're the CEO of a company that used to have powerful enemies, you learn to be prepared for extreme situations. I hope we don't need to use any of this. I hope so too, but I prefer to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. They arrived at Carmen's office 10 minutes before the scheduled time. The building on Madison Avenue looked different in daylight, more decadent, darker. Hannah noticed there were few cars in the parking lot, few people circulating. It was the perfect location for a meeting no one should witness. "We can still leave," Ryan said, as they watched the building entrance. "No, we've come this far. Let's finish it." They rode up to the 12th floor in silence. Hannah felt the weight of the protective vest against her chest, the communication device in her ear. It was as if she were entering a war zone, not visiting an adoptive mother. The office door was open, but the reception was empty. Carmen appeared at the back door, but Hannah almost didn't recognize her. She had exchanged the elegant clothes for jeans and a black leather jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and there was something hard in her eyes that Hannah had never seen before. "Punctual as always," Carmen said, her voice cold and calculating. "Come in." She led them to the same room as before, but now the environment seemed threatening. The windows were covered by closed blinds. There was only one lamp lit, creating sinister shadows on the walls. "Sit down," Carmen said, but remained standing behind the desk. Hannah and Ryan sat side by side, remaining alert. "Well," Carmen began, "it seems you discovered more than I expected." "We discovered you killed my real mother," Hannah said directly. Carmen tilted her head, as if considering an academic question. "Melanie was always too idealistic. She thought she could save the world by exposing some financial schemes. So you killed her." "I silenced her. There's a difference." "There's no difference at all." Carmen smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, there is, darling. Melanie died quickly, without suffering. If I had wanted to be cruel, I would have done it very differently." Ryan leaned forward. "And Isabella Valenti?" "Ah, Isabella." Carmen finally sat down, crossing her legs with casual elegance. "Isabella was a miscalculation on Lawrence's part. He thought he could intimidate her, make her cooperate with his plans. But she resisted. Isabella was too brave for her own good. She discovered the records Lawrence kept hidden, threatened to turn everything over to the authorities. So Lawrence killed her?" Carmen laughed. "Lawrence didn't have the courage to kill a cockroach. No, that honor was mine." Hannah felt nausea rising in her throat. "You killed Ryan's mother. Pushed a drunk woman down the stairs. It wasn't exactly a technical challenge." The coldness in Carmen's voice as she described the murder was shocking. Hannah could see Ryan beside her, hands clenched into fists, struggling to control himself. "Why?" Hannah asked. "Why kill innocent people?" "Innocent?" Carmen leaned forward. "Hannah, darling, you still don't understand how the world works. There are no innocent people, just people who haven't been caught yet." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Your precious Ryan here grew up in an empire built on blood and corruption. You spent months investigating and lying to get what you wanted. We all do what's necessary to survive. There's a difference between lying and killing. There's a difference of degree, not of nature." Ryan finally spoke, his voice controlled but tense. "What do you want, Carmen?" "I want you to stop digging up the past." "Why?" "Because there are skeletons buried that shouldn't be discovered. Secrets that could destroy people who had nothing to do with the old crimes." Hannah frowned. "What people?" Carmen hesitated for the first time in the conversation. "Hannah, there are things about your family you don't know." "What things?" "Your father, for example." Hannah's heart stopped. "My father is dead. He's not, and he's not who you think he is." Ryan and Hannah exchanged alarmed glances. "Explain," Ryan demanded. "Hannah's father is a United States Senator, a married man with family, brilliant political career. He doesn't know Hannah exists, and finding out could destroy everything he's built." Hannah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "You're lying." "I'm trying to protect you." "Melanie?" Your real mother had an affair with this man in the 80s. When she discovered she was pregnant, he offered money for an abortion. She refused but promised never to reveal the paternity. And you knew this secret. I knew and used it when necessary. There are powerful people who would pay a lot to keep this information buried. Ryan stood up abruptly. You're blackmailing Hannah's father. I'm ensuring certain truths remain private. For how long? Hannah asked, her voice coming out hoarse. For how long what? For how long have you been blackmailing my father? Carmen smiled again. Since you turned 18, it was very convenient to discover I had a grown daughter of an influential senator. The revelation hit Hannah like an avalanche. Not only had she grown up without a father, but her biological father was being blackmailed because of her existence for more than a decade. Who is he? She asked. That doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Carmen considered the question for a long moment. Senator Edward Mitchell, Justice and Public Security Committee. Hannah recognized the name. Edward Mitchell was a respected politician, known for anti-corruption campaigns. The irony of the situation was brutal. And now? Ryan asked. What do you want from us? I want you to stop investigating. I want you to accept that the past should remain buried, and I want Hannah to come with me. What do you mean, come with you? Carmen stood up, walking to the window. The people I work for discovered you're asking too many questions. They want a definitive solution to the problem. What kind of solution? Ryan asked, his voice dangerously low. The kind that keeps everyone quiet forever. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying they want to kill us? I'm saying I can convince them to spare you, but there are conditions. What conditions? Carmen turned to face them. Hannah comes with me, disappears, starts a new life in another country with a new identity, and Ryan completely stops the investigations. And if we refuse, then you'll both have very convincing accidents. The silence that followed was dense. Hannah could hear her own heart beating, could feel the tension radiating from Ryan beside her. I need time to think, Hannah said finally. There is no time. The decision has to be now. Then the answer is no. Carmen sighed, as if she were disappointed but not surprised. I expected you to say that. She moved quickly, pulling a gun from the desk drawer. I'm sorry, Hannah, I really am. You were the best part of all these horrible years. Ryan reacted instinctively, pushing Hannah aside while pulling his own gun. The sound of gunshots echoed through the small room, deafening in the proximity. Hannah fell behind the desk, her ear ringing, trying to process what was happening. There was blood on the floor, but she couldn't tell whose it was. Ryan, she shouted. I'm okay, came the response, but he sounded injured. Hannah crawled around the desk and found Ryan leaning against the wall, holding his left shoulder. Blood was seeping between his fingers. Where is she? Hannah whispered. She ran through the back door. Hannah helped Ryan to his feet, quickly assessing the wound. The bullet had gone through his shoulder but didn't seem to have hit anything vital. We need to get out of here, she said. Agreed. They left the building quickly, Ryan leaning on Hannah. On the street, she hailed a taxi and gave the address of the nearest hospital. During the journey, Ryan held her hand firmly. Hannah, she was serious about the threats. Powerful people want to silence us. I know. Maybe we should consider her offer. You could disappear, be safe. No. Hannah squeezed his hand. I won't run, I won't let her win. But if they try to kill you, then we'll be prepared. Together. Ryan smiled despite the pain. Together. Together. At the hospital, while they waited for Ryan to be treated, Hannah had time to process everything she had discovered. Carmen wasn't just a criminal. She was a predator who had used an orphaned child's love as a manipulation tool for decades. But there was something more in the afternoon's revelations. Carmen had shown fear for the first time. Fear of the people she worked for, fear of the consequences of failing. This meant there was a hierarchy above her, people even more dangerous who wanted Hannah and Ryan silenced. And it meant the fight was just beginning. When Ryan came out of surgery with his arm in a sling but conscious and alert, Hannah had a plan. We're going to finish this, she said. How? We're going to find the people who hired Carmen, and we're going to make them an offer they can't refuse. What kind of offer? Hannah smiled, and there was something fierce in her expression that made Ryan realize the gentle woman he had fallen in love with had sharp claws when necessary, the kind of offer that transforms hunters into prey.